It's a lot of hypocrisy going on, man, and it's really hilarious how
Let's talk about the hypocrisy in fan reactions after Paige Becker's national championship win. It should have been a moment to celebrate her hard-earned victory, but instead, fans turned it into a platform for comparison. Why do some feel the need to compare players during moments of triumph? Fans have been comparing Becker's to Caitlin Clark, which is absurd. Becker's led her team to a national championship and has had a remarkable career. Yet, fans focus more on comparing her to another player rather than appreciating her own achievements. Why can't we acknowledge Becker's for what she's done without bringing someone else's legacy into it? Becker's victory should have been about celebrating her championship, not turning it into a debate about Clark's legacy. Fans are framing Becker's win as part of a debate about who's better, as if one victory must diminish the other. Why define athletes by comparisons instead of letting them stand on their own merit? This is the state of sports fandom, where one athlete's success can't be celebrated without comparisons and debates that distract from the true glory of the moment. That's the hypocrisy I'm talking about. Let's discuss all this in more detail. Caitlin Clark, not playing in the national championship, still dominated headlines, overshadowing the actual game. This isn't about her being a star, it's about the media's obsession with her. How can a player, not even on the court, generate more buzz than the athletes who won the title? Clark trended on social media more than figures like Dawn Staley and Paige Becker's after UConn's championship win. How is that possible? It's strange when players who just won aren't getting as much attention as someone on the sidelines. This reflects the media's narrative and what it chooses to spotlight. Let's talk about the ring debate. Paige Becker's has a national championship ring. Caitlin Clark does not. But does that determine who moves the needle more in women's basketball? Some argue rings define success, but this ignores the impact players like Clark have had on the game. It's not just about championships. It's how players change the sport, regardless of titles. Paige Becker's returned from a serious ACL injury, an obstacle that ends many careers. She came back stronger. In the national championship, her leadership and composure were key to UConn's success. Her journey is about resilience and delivering when it matters. UConn dominated South Carolina, 82-59. The win added to coach Gino Auriemma's historic record, reinforcing his status as one of the game's best. UConn's performance was sharp, both offensively and defensively. Becker's was a consistent force. Her points, assists, and leadership stood out throughout the tournament. She climbed the NCAA points rankings with clutch performances and impact plays. Becker's had strong support. Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd were standout contributors. Their chemistry and defense gave UConn a critical edge. This was a full team effort, executed at a high level. Right after UConn clinched the national championship, social media didn't light up with celebration for Paige Becker's. Instead, it became a battleground of debates. What should have been a proud moment for Becker's and her team turned into arguments, comparisons, and distractions. Rather than focusing on her comeback story or her leadership throughout the tournament, people online quickly shifted the spotlight to someone who wasn't even playing: Caitlin Clark. Becker's achievement was quickly overshadowed by fan-fueled comparisons. The conversation wasn't about her skills, her stats, or how she helped UConn dominate the court. It became all about how her title affected Clark's legacy. The win, instead of standing on its own, was turned into another chapter in a rivalry that fans are forcing more than the players themselves. That constant need to compare stripped away the joy of a well-earned victory. NBA player Ethan Thomas jumped into the conversation, tweeting about Becker's having a championship ring and Clark not having one. It wasn't just a statement, it stirred up even more division. His comment, meant to praise Becker's, ended up fueling the rivalry talk even more. Rather than lifting one player up, it dragged both into another round of media and fan-driven debate. Across Twitter, Instagram, and sports forums, the focus was less on what Becker's had done and more on what it supposedly meant for Clark. Fans argued stats, rings, and greatness, turning Becker's championship into a referendum on Clark's legacy. What got lost in all this noise was the actual performance, the teamwork, and the story behind UConn's dominant win. Moments after UConn's championship win, the conversation online shifted. Instead of focusing on Paige Becker's comeback, leadership, and performance, people jumped straight into hot takes. Who moves the needle more, Beckers or Clark? It wasn't about the game. It wasn't about UConn's dominance. It was a popularity contest wrapped in sports analysis. The narrative changed in real time from celebration to comparison, as if success can't exist without stacking it against someone else's. Mainstream outlets didn't help. Headlines and segments fed into the rivalry, framing Becker's title as a challenge to Clark's cultural impact. Instead of analyzing UConn's strategy or Becker's growth as a player, they leaned into drama. The players haven't asked for this. Beckers has praised Clark publicly, and Clark has respected Becker's talent. Still, the media continues to build a rivalry that benefits clicks and ratings, not the athletes. Many fans are tired. They've taken to social media to call out the constant comparisons. Some have said it's disrespectful to both players to turn every game or start into a competition between two people who aren't even on the court together. The backlash isn't just from neutral observers. It's coming from people who genuinely enjoy the sport and want to see women's basketball grow without being reduced to artificial storylines. They want to celebrate great performances without the pressure of choosing sides. Let's shift from opinions to actual numbers. Viewership data reveals how different narratives impact audience interest, regardless of on-court performance. Numbers don't lie. They show where attention is going and how public interest is shaped. In 2024, women's basketball reached a historic peak. The Final Four matchup between Iowa and UConn drew 14.2 million viewers. The championship game, Iowa versus South Carolina featuring Caitlin Clark, surged even higher, hitting 18.9 million viewers. These weren't just sports fans. Mainstream audiences were tuning in. Clark's popularity, media coverage, and the storylines surrounding her journey turned these games into cultural events. Fast forward to 2025. Despite strong narratives, Paige Becker's comeback from injury, South Carolina's undefeated season, and coach Gino Auriemma's legacy, the championship game drew only 8.5 million viewers. That's a steep drop from the previous year, despite similar stakes and arguably better basketball. The game itself was competitive and high quality, yet the audience didn't show up in the same way. Clark's games in 2024 weren't just basketball. They were events. The media built them up, and fans responded. Becker's 2025 run, while equally impressive on the court, didn't receive the same treatment. The drop in viewership highlights how much media hype, individual branding, and narrative framing drive audience engagement. It's not just about performance, it's about visibility, storytelling, and star power. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring attention to women's basketball, she expanded its audience. Her games consistently pulled in millions of viewers, many of whom were casual fans or first-time watchers. That shift is measurable. She turned regular season matchups and tournament games into must-watch events, drawing numbers that rivaled or even surpassed men's games. Her appeal wasn't limited to basketball diehards. She reached people outside the sport's usual demographic. The phrase "moves the needle" gets thrown around often, but the viewership numbers give it real meaning. In 2024, Clark's presence directly correlated with record-breaking ratings. Her games weren't just well-watched, they were cultural moments. By contrast, when Clark wasn't in the spotlight in 2025, those numbers dropped significantly, even with other top players and compelling storylines in the mix. The data confirms her ability to attract attention, drive media coverage, and increase overall interest in the sport. Clark's popularity wasn't just about stats or wins, it was about connection. Fans saw her as authentic, passionate, and relatable. Her emotional style of play, clear leadership, and visibility in interviews and social media helped people feel like they knew her. That kind of connection builds loyalty. Fans followed her journey not just because she was good at basketball, but because they believed in her story. That's a powerful force, and it's one of the key reasons she became the face of the sport during her college career. The numbers tell a clear story. The 2025 Women's Final Four saw a major drop in viewership, with the championship game drawing only 8.5 million viewers. In contrast, the The 2024 Final Four game between Iowa and UConn brought in 14.2 million, and the championship game featuring Caitlin Clark versus South Carolina reached 18.9 million viewers, an all-time record. The difference is too large to ignore. Even with compelling narratives like Paige Becker's comeback and South Carolina's undefeated run, the audience simply wasn't the same. The drop highlights just how much Clark's presence elevated interest in the sport. Even in her absence, Caitlin Clark remained a central figure in 2025 conversations. Her 2024 performances are still referenced in broadcasts, articles, and online discussions. She became the benchmark for attention, engagement, and cultural relevance in women's college basketball. No other player, including champions, matched her media presence or the size of her fan base. Her legacy isn't just tied to what she did on the court. It's about how she changed the scale of the sport's visibility. The fact that her past games continue to be the standard proves her lasting influence, even when she's no longer playing. Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers have not only changed the game on the court, but are also playing a key role in the growing business of women's basketball. Their presence in the sport is translating into increased sponsorship deals, brand endorsements, and media coverage. Major brands are beginning to invest more heavily in women's sports, recognizing the untapped potential for marketing and viewership. Both players are also leveraging their personal brands to influence the sports industry's future. For example, Caitlin Clark's visibility in the media has led to significant brand deals with major corporations, while Paige Beckers, known for her resilience after recovering from an ACL injury, has built a strong personal narrative that brands want to be associated with. This is opening doors for future female athletes who may not have had the same level of opportunities in the past. As women's basketball becomes more popular, we can expect these athletes to continue to drive new business ventures such as merchandise lines, influencer deals, and even partnerships with major broadcasters. The growth of women's sports is now a viable business model, and athletes like Clark and Beckers are leading the way. The landscape of women's sports media coverage has undergone a dramatic transformation in recent years, with athletes like Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers at the forefront of this shift. Not long ago, women's sports often struggled to get the same media attention as their male counterparts. However, platforms like social media, streaming services, and digital media have allowed female athletes to connect directly with their audience, bypassing traditional media gatekeepers. This has led to an explosion of visibility and recognition. Caitlin Clark's national popularity is a clear example of this evolution. Her performances not only garnered attention in traditional sports outlets, but also across platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Media coverage has gone beyond just game results. It now delves into their personalities, stories, and the cultures they represent. This broader approach is changing the narrative of women's sports from just games to cultural phenomena. Women's sports are now seen as more than just an afterthought, with networks like ESPN and CBS dedicating more airtime to women's games. This shift signals that the media world is catching up with the growing interest in women's athletics, ensuring the continued growth of the industry. Paige Beckers deserves full recognition for leading her team to a national championship. Her comeback from injury, her leadership on the court, and her performance under pressure mark her as one of the elite players in women's college basketball. Her win is not just personal, it's a major milestone for UConn and for the sport as a whole. At the same time, Caitlin Clark's impact cannot be ignored. Her ability to draw national attention, break viewership records, and turn routine games into must-watch events elevated the sport to new heights. These contributions exist in different forms, but both matter. Women's college basketball is experiencing a shift, and both Beckers and Clark are central to it. Beckers represents excellence in execution and team success. Clark represents visibility, growth, and cultural relevance. Together, they show that the sport doesn't need just one type of star, it needs many. As the conversation continues, it's important to stop forcing comparisons and start appreciating how each player is helping redefine what success, influence, and leadership look like in women's sports. They're not rivals. They're both rewriting the narrative in their own way. What do you think about the impact of Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark on women's college basketball? Are comparisons fair, Or should we celebrate each player for their unique contributions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.